Let me tell you a story. You know that I love you. I can't believe it, Peter whispered. He walked around, scratching his head furiously, brooding. What have I done? His disheveled hair and tormented expression would have terrified anyone. I've sinned. I've destroyed my life, he sobbed. His light green eyes had turned red and were alternating between the blindness and blur that violent, bitter tears produce. A cold sweat bathed him, causing him to tremble, and the foul taste of sin burned in his heart. Years later, he would remember that moment, and it would torment him so much that he had to battle against the impulse to end his life. Once home, he tossed in bed. If only I could go back, he cried to himself. If only I had the chance to change the past, but no, there's nothing I can do. Now I can only wait for the guillotine to fall on my head, and then the end. He sat up in bed for a few moments and looked at his watch. He noticed a splotch of blood covering the minute hand. He hurried to clean it off and then confirmed that it was 6:30 on a Friday that he wanted to forget. After a long sigh, he left the room. All was over. The next few nights, Peter fled without knowing where he was going. A few days later, he was caught by the police. After a short trial, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. 23 years later, Peter found himself among the attendees of a faith group I was leading. At the end of one meeting, Peter asked me if we could talk. Once alone, he told me his story. He had murdered the man who had abused his little sister for a long time. That ordeal began for Peter on a Friday, the Friday of Holy Week. After spending 2 purgative decades in prison, Peter was freed, not on the inside. One morning, having spent the entire night drinking, he was walking down an unfrequented street. From a distance, he noticed a soft light emanating from a small chapel that was wedged in among the other buildings on the block. Drawn towards it, Peter approached and entered in. 2 ladies were inside, kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament. Peter thought about leaving, but he felt a tug on his heart to stay, so he sat down. At his side, he spotted a pamphlet. Picking it up, he began to read. As he scanned through it, his eyes were arrested by the words of Jesus to his apostle after the resurrection. Peter, do you love me? In that moment, a burning arrow pierced his heart. He didn't know what to say. He began to weep. Raising his eyes, he beheld the Eucharistic host and the monstrance before him. Peter understood. The risen Christ was speaking those words to his heart at that very moment, asking Peter if he loved him. Peter clenched his teeth, fell to his knees, dropped his forehead to the ground, and said, Lord, forgive me. You know that I love you. That day, Peter's Calvary ended. It was Easter Sunday. All of us, to some extent, have turned away from Jesus with our sins and indifference. We have stopped looking at the cross and ceased to trust in the resurrection, yet Jesus Christ has died for us and rose to give us life in abundance. Today, I invite you to close your eyes, be silent for a moment, to say your name in the place of Peter's, and to listen to those words of Jesus. Do you love me? How will you respond to him? May God bless you for listening to this reflection, and may he be with you always. And if your heart was moved while hearing this, let others experience the same. Subscribe and share it.